The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to our April 2016 webinar on introducing at-risk youth to relationship skills for love, life, and work. And I am excited that today joining me today is Marline Pearson. She's the author of the Love Notes program and also Relationship Smarts Plus. And my name is Aaron Larson. I'm with the Dibble Institute, and I've had the great honor and privilege of working with Marline over the last number of years. And actually, I've known Marline for, I don't know, probably 15 years, but we've worked closely on a number of her products over the last couple of years. And so I'm very excited for you to have this opportunity to hear directly from Marline as she talks about how the Love Notes program, some of the things that we've done to update it, and everything that she's been learning over the last 10 years or so teaching it, and how she's incorporated that. And so, but first, before we jump into the webinar, I wanted to introduce, there's probably some of you on the webinar today who are new to the Dibble Institute. And so I wanted to introduce you to the Dibble Institute, but before I do, I guess there's some of this webinar stuff that I need to go over, and that is, if you're having any issues with the audio specifically, then what you can do is you can call in on that phone number that's on the screen. It's also in the email that was provided to you, and then you just type in the code and you can participate that way. Also, as we go through today's webinar, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into that little box on the right and send me the questions, and then towards the end, we've tried to leave enough time to be able to answer any questions. Also, for those of you who are interested in listening to the webinar again, or also getting a hold of the PowerPoint slides, next week we'll actually have them archived on our website, so dibbleinstitute.org, and then if you click on the webinars and then the archive link, you can get to it that way. So going back to the Dibble Institute, so the Dibble Institute was founded by Charlie Dibble and his wife Helen over 20 years ago, and Charlie, what he noticed was that he was an engineer, and as with any engineer, when there's a problem, he wants to come up with solutions. And one of the things that he noticed was that there was a lack of resources for young people in terms of teaching them the relationship skills so that they could form and sustain healthy marriages. And so he brought together some of the experts in the field, donated a significant portion of his own finances to start up the Dibble Institute. And so over the last 20 years, literally because of his efforts, hundreds of thousands of youth, literally all over the world, have been positively impacted and have been able to learn some of the research-based skills and knowledge to form and sustain healthy relationships. Also, the Dibble Institute, very much, we believe in research. And so that's where we go to for our information. We have our authors go to the research for their information. And so everything that we do is very much research-based. And what's been exciting over the last 10 years or so is as some federal evaluators have been evaluating our programs are now also evidence-based as well. The Dibble Institute, in terms of some of the things that we believe in, very much the Dibble Institute believes in stable, healthy families. And very much want to emphasize the key word healthy and stable. And so we're not about wanting people to get into relationships just for the sake of a relationship or marriage for the sake of a marriage. Very much we want them to be able to form and sustain healthy relationships and healthy marriages. So that should go without saying, no domestic violence, etc. Also, the Dibble Institute very much believes that all people deserve respect, and all people should be able to have access to the skills to help them to form healthy relationships. And so at this point, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to turn over the control of the screen to Marline, and she is going to take over with her slides. And so now, Marline, you can go ahead and take over your slides and have it go full screen. Yep. So I think you're ready to go, Marline.
Is that working now?
It is.
Well, Yeah, it's good. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm going to minimize this part of my screen that's getting in the way, but whoops, sorry. There we go. Okay, I think we're fine. So I'll start. Um, well, I want to give a warm welcome to everybody, and I want to thank you so much for participating in this webinar. And there's a lot to cover, and but so we'll get started right away by me making a suggestion here. And I want to suggest that the ability to form healthy relationships, to maintain them, safe ones, I think that directly impacts a youth's sexual decision making and sexual behaviors. And as you know from reading the webinar description, Love Notes is a new kind of a program that does integrate relationship education into pregnancy and STI prevention. Now, in doing so, we believe that it will advance prevention goals, that it can increase contraception, condom use, and sexual delay. And what I plan to do today is first explain the approach and why we think so, and then secondly, I'd like to describe what relationship education actually looks like, and then how to integrate it with pregnancy prevention. And then finally, I'd like to present a few of the key findings in the recently completed study, which has landed Love Notes on the national list for evidence-based pregnancy prevention programs. So let me start with the whys behind the approach. And I guess, first of all, I'd like to say that sexual behaviors, they don't occur just within the context of what a young person knows about health risks, or about contraception, or about condoms. Really, when you think about it, young people make decisions about sex in this larger context of their lives and their relationships. We know that, for instance, how a teenager or a young person, young adult, defines their relationship, how they perceive the social peer norms around them, how they communicate with a partner, how they perceive the balance of power within the relationship, and even on to the difficulties and challenges from early life that they've experienced. We know that all of these things tend to influence sexual behaviors and sexual health risks. Things like when a teen first has sex, or whether or not they use condoms, or they use contraception. Secondly, in terms of whys, it's awfully easy to slide into risky sexual behaviors when you know little about healthy relationships, and even more so if you've had a history of past hurts, of early adverse experiences. Many young people, and especially our most vulnerable, say that they themselves don't have models of healthy relationships in their everyday personal worlds. And yet most youth, including most at-risk youth, strongly desire to have a healthy relationship. In focus groups, they'll tell us they have little confidence, though, that it's possible. And so, yes, young people, when asked, they can list general qualities of healthy relationships, but many have no idea of how to get there, that it could be within their reach. Some have very little sense of personal power in relationships. Thirdly, it's also easy to make poor sexual choices if you've never been encouraged to think about what you would want sexual involvement to mean. When you think about it, sex is not just about the body, it's also about the heart. But rarely are youth asked to think about sex beyond the usual health paradigm of risks, protection, or mechanics of sex. And yet, that might really help youth to find a sort of a context for sex that would be personally meaningful to them and also protective of their own aspirations in life. And isn't that, after all, what we want? Love Notes teaches about intimacy, its many dimensions. It uses youth-generated poetry, narratives, stories, music, films. All of these are used to inspire and to help youth tap into their aspirations, identify them. These mediums are used to help youth consider what they want deepening levels of sexual intimacy to even mean. Now, for sure, Love Notes offers the sexual health toolkit. In other words, medically accurate, thorough bioreproductive, sexuality, STI information on contraception, on condoms, including LARCs, long-acting, emergency contraception, practice with refusal skills, negotiation skills. But what's unique about Love Notes is that it joins the health model together with an effort to encourage young people to define their own context for sex and a pace for intimate involvement. And then it embeds that into a robust relationship skills program. So what elements does a relationship ed program contain? Let me just very briefly say that it should offer ways to learn more about oneself. It can help youth cultivate a vision for the kind of relationship they want. It can offer insights on choosing partners, guides on what to pay attention to. It can help youth identify the building blocks, the foundations of a good relationship. It can explore the chemistry of attraction and romance. It can offer ways to assess whether a relationship is healthy or not. It can offer frameworks for making relationship decisions. And it can also, importantly, raise awareness of warning signs of dangerous relationships, how and where to get help. Now, the working assumption behind Love Notes is that these kinds of elements can help youth be more discerning about when and with whom and how fast they become involved with someone. And importantly, a relationship education program includes communication and conflict management skills. That's really quite vital as well. Now, together, these kinds of relationship concepts and skills can really add to a young person's ability to assert and to negotiate their own intentions, to help them define the relationship, to assert their boundaries, how they want to pace their the physical side of their relationships, the sexual side of the relationship, to be assertive on the use of protection, to be intentional, I guess, really, in a meaningful way, to protect themselves and to act upon their aspirations. And then also, if we add a new element, a new kind of pregnancy prevention message, it's something I call Through the Eyes of a Child. It's kind of an entirely sort of new way to reinforce pregnancy prevention, one that really puts the child at center stage, to help young people feel and see what an unplanned pregnancy means to a child. It really moves young males and females far more, I've found, than a sort of a self-interested approach. And I think it produces a greater motivation to avoid pregnancy, to be intentional, and to be a planner, to plan. So I guess to conclude just sort of the approach and the whys before I get into what, is that I think a more holistic approach that pays a lot more attention to relationships, to sexual meaning, to new kinds of messages like Through the Eyes of a Child, that can encourage youth to be more intentional in a meaningful way, and importantly, much more likely to put that whole health toolkit to use, to work, whether it be using contraception, condoms, whether it's refusal skills, delay skills, negotiation, exit strategies, whether it's to delay or to protect. And near and dear to my heart are vulnerable youth. I spent my lifetime working with vulnerable youth. And these youth typically have little in the way of models, and many have early trauma in their lives. And I think a holistic approach like this is really important because, after all, I think our job is really to help young people achieve aspirations, not just to know what to avoid, not just to protect their bodies. Of course I want to protect their bodies, but to achieve their aspirations. And I guess one way I would say it is that it's not just safer sex that we're after. Yes, we are, but we're also after healthy selves and healthy and safe relationships. And so now I want to move on to the more descriptive part of what a program like this might actually look like. So if you look at Love Notes, it has 4 major parts spread out over 14 lessons: knowing yourself, developing and sustaining healthy relationships, what I call a health and heart-based approach to sexual decision-making and sexual planning, and new messages on pregnancy prevention and planning one's future. Each lesson in this curriculum is activity-based, drawing, sculpting, activities that use real-life scenarios that are written by youth. It uses music, songs, music videos, film, poetry, stories. It has PowerPoint slides where video clips, hyperlinks to YouTube clips, music videos are all included. There's a very engaging workbook that youth use to apply the concepts and skills to their own personal lives. Very importantly, there is a trusted adult connection piece. Every single lesson has an activity to extend the conversation with significant others outside the classroom or the workshop. And in many cases, you have to help youth find these people in the programs you're working with and link them up. But that is just a really important element of it. And so what I want to do now is I just want to take you through a very quick visual journey of the curriculum. Very fast, just sort of giving you a sense of kind of what's in it. As I said, the first part is really about knowing yourself, self-awareness. And it kind of starts with this sort of basic idea that good relationships really start with the individual. The healthier a person is, the more they've tended to their own growth and development, the more likely they'll have healthy relationships, whatever their sexual orientation. And so some of the initial activities help teens understand themselves better, like who am I? How has my past shaped who I am today? Where do I want to be going? And again, I think that's especially critical for vulnerable youth. Many young people have unmet needs and other difficulties from their past that lead them into poor relationship choices and risky sexual behaviors. Okay, so let me show you some of the activities that are utilized to do this. One activity, which is a lot of fun, but very interesting and unthreatening way to learn about yourself, is to do a personality style inventory, to understand a little bit more about your strengths and take pride in them, as well as maybe perhaps some of the challenge areas. It's also a great way to understand others better and how personality style conflicts and differences play into relationships. Another activity is to examine one's past experiences, to see how the past experiences, and especially patterns experienced in family growing up, has shaped a person. It not only helps a youth to better understand him or herself, but it can also help a young person decide, well, what patterns do I want to leave behind? What do I want to work to change? We use this sorting baggage activity to raise awareness of how positive past experiences and negative past experience have sort of shaped your current behaviors. And there's just a lot of great discussion there on how these experiences can affect a person and how some people learn from negative experiences and, you kind of make lemonade out of lemons. You learn from these things. There's a family patterns questionnaire in their workbook that helps them really examine some of the patterns they experienced in their own families growing up. And each young person on their own decides what was good, what was not so good. They identify what they don't want to repeat. It helps them make some meaning of their past, which especially is important for those with past trauma and difficulties. And it also empowers them with the idea, which is so important, that one's past is never one's destiny, that anybody can decide to do things differently if you become aware and if you acquire the skills and support to do things differently. The theme of knowing yourself continues by encouraging youth to define the kinds of qualities that are important to them in a partner, in a relationship, and also identifying what qualities they value in themselves that they really want a partner to notice. Another activity is clarifying relationship expectations. In their workbook, they've got a fairly extensive questionnaire, 20-some relationship expectation questions. Love Notes also uses popular media to explore self-awareness. The film Antoine Fisher is particularly good, and ways to use it are included in Love Notes. Many sites that use Love Notes, including the many youth that I've taught Love Notes to, we found this film to be really effective in terms of bringing home the issues of past experiences to empower change. There are also several links in the PowerPoints to contemporary music videos that are used to convey important empowerment messages. The second part of the curriculum is all on developing and sustaining healthy relationships. And here's just a quick sampling of activities, concepts, and skills. Youth start out by simply brainstorming. What are the qualities and characteristics that they think makes up a great relationship? By the way, almost all young people can do this. You know, whatever, all young people can do it. But then they are challenged to take those ingredients and to build a great relationship from the bottom up, especially focusing on the ingredients, the characteristics that would be need to be evident early on, that would build a good foundation. See, this kind of activity gets them thinking about building blocks, how relationships develop, and how to pace one's involvement. It also helps to build the awareness of the risks of sliding too quickly to the next level before you know much about the person, or if you know if the basics are even there. Another important topic is the chemistry of attraction and what happens in the brain. When you're strongly attracted, the brain has all sorts of neurochemical and hormonal changes that produce incredibly real and good feelings. But as we all know, until those love chemicals settle a bit, the person won't see very clearly. That adorable little puppy that's just perfect that you fall for could turn out to be a pretty nasty dog. And so the point here is that these chemicals are wonderful. Enjoy the great feelings, but they're real. But you won't really see clearly for a few months. And that kind of makes the advice of take it slowly until those love chemicals settle a bit just smart. I mean, not old-fashioned, not moralistic, but just kind of smart. In another lesson, there's a set of guiding principles for smart relationships. So you can look at these 7 principles and see what you think. How do they sound to you? The point is that you can't just lecture these things, and so they are brought to life with real-life relationship scenarios. There's about 4 different scenarios, and by the way, I've worked with youth to develop all of the scenarios, examples that are used in the curriculum. And these scenarios are used in a discovery activity. And that discovery activity is everybody sort of votes with their thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this smart? Is this not so smart? Or whatever. And it's a non-threatening way to really think about, excuse me, relationship behaviors, attitudes, situations, whatever. And then they have in their workbook, these principles are turned into 7 questions that really ask them to apply it to their own friendships, to their own relationships, and even if they've never had a relationship, to someone's relationship or friendship. It actually helps them to know what to pay attention to, and it gives them a little of criteria for examining relationships. Another activity helps youth develop a more realistic concept of love. It's so easy to say, I love you, baby, but what's that? Are we all on the same page about that? So yes, love is chemistry. Love is also intimacy and friendship. Love is also trust and commitment. Trust and commitment. And of course, nurturing all 3 is really the great challenge over time in any serious relationship or later on, perhaps a marriage. They have a fun workbook activity where it asks them to be a relationship expert, a relationship advisor to a young couple with an unplanned pregnancy, and they want to have a future together. And they love each other and they want to keep it good. So anyways, also, let's move on. Youth need ways to assess relationships. Is it healthy? Is it worth it? Should I stay? Should I go? Is it safe or is it dangerous? How can you know? It's not always so clear. A lot of people struggle. I bet you many of the people listening in on this webinar have struggled over that issue at one point in their lives. Should I stay? Should I go? I don't know. Well, youth are given 3 profound, simple but profound questions. How does it feel deep down? Controlling or equal and supportive? Conditional or unconditional? Mostly about sex, money, or status? Or is the attraction on many levels? And so 6 cards have been developed with relationship descriptions on each one. And in groups, in small groups or pairs, they're asked to discuss these and then to come and make sculptures. So I'm just going to run through some of these sculptures to give you an idea. Here's a sculpture for controlling and disrespectful. You can see the woman bowing down to the man. Here's another one. It's kind of cute. Equal and supportive. They're in a canoe, and the water, there's rocks and waves, challenges, like in a relationship, but they work together to get down the river. Conditional. You worry about being good enough. You worry about cheating. You're checking up. This is the girl with binoculars checking in. This one, I think, is kind of sweet. The girl is emerging from the egg, like the yolk symbolizing birth. Anyways, here's another one. A friendship bracelet. Sort of kind of cute. Attraction on many levels. I like the rainbow-colored sticks under them, representing friendship to love on so many levels of communication. They're having fun, they're laughing, they're enjoying each other's company. Anyways, after this, after doing this, oh, here's another one, mostly about sex, money, or status. The pink is the guy in the bed throwing money at her, and then of course you can see the ring and the money and all of that. But after that, then they actually, this is just one page, there's a 2-page application where they actually assess a relationship. Now again, some young people have not had a relationship or have not even had sex, and you can do this in terms of your own relationship, a past one, or somebody else's. But it's a really good way to really look at these 3 very critical areas. Okay, at this point, we move into dating violence. And there's an activity using these flags. It's called the red flags activity. With all these scenarios, you can see these cards. And it's meant to raise awareness of abusive behaviors. But what I think is really good about that activity is that it helps to determine which behaviors are normal or safe and which behaviors cross the line. Or, you know, for a lot of young people, it's really not so clear. But recognizing abuse is really the first step, because youth also need to practice skills to prevent and halt disrespectful behavior. When you think about it, if you see this arrow here, it goes from disrespect all the way to murder. I know that sounds rather dramatic, but as we know, relationship violence can be lethal, as we all know. And abuse doesn't pop out of nowhere. You could really trace it back to that very first sign of disrespect. And so there are activities to help young people draw the line of respect from the start, or to draw the line starting today, because we really want to encourage young people to set high standards from the start, or to raise their standards. I think it's also important to touch the emotions. And I think one way to do that is to look at how relationship violence affects children. And for some, it means remembering their own childhoods. The music video by Kelly Clarkson, Because of You, is, I think, a very interesting music video that really touches every class, every group that I've taught. She remembers, you know, she's an adult now with a child, and she remembers her own childhood, thinks about how the violence in her family affected her, how it affects her now, and it really motivates her and her partner to change. We also discuss what it's like for a boy to grow up having to protect his mom from an abusive partner. It's something we don't talk about that much, but it's a little too prevalent. We should talk about it a lot more. I use also a TED Talk by Tony Porter. Call to Men. He talks about his boyhood in the South Bronx and all the messages that he received that tend to lead males to disrespect, mistreat, abuse females and each other. I also have a Leslie Steiner Morgan, Crazy Love. I don't know if anybody has seen that TED Talk. It's very powerful. It's so dramatic about how somebody gets sucked into a very, very dangerous relationship. After this, we talk about ways to help friends. We also talk about, we browse the teen websites, Love is Respect, which is just fantastic. All the interactive quizzes, the chat, the text lines. But all of this really kind of reinforces and helps raise awareness about the risks of sliding and the safety of deciding when it comes to relationships and sex. And that's a real important construct of this program, sliding versus deciding. Okay, youth engage also in a kind of formal decision-making process about relationships. Get them thinking about decisions they could actually make rather than just kind of letting things happen. Even the smallest things, like, are you ready to be known as a couple? Are you ready to say I love you? Are you ready to change your Facebook status? Are you ready to have sex, continue to have sex, break up, what birth control? There's a whole series of things that they check that are important to make decisions about. And then in the workbook, they turn the page and they're given a whole menu of suggestions that ask them what kinds of things here might help them to find out, to know before making those decisions. And so it makes that decision making a little more explicit. The next set of activities, and there's 2 lessons devoted to this, rather robust lessons, are communication and conflict management skills. It really starts with an awareness of what are the key patterns that harm relationships, and then it builds skills to reduce those patterns, to avoid, to exit out of those negative patterns. So for instance, how to take a time out. There's a sort of a 5-step process that we teach. How to raise complaints. We teach them a formula and they practice that. How to raise issues and complaints effectively. How to talk through, how to use the speaker lister technique to talk through difficult, sensitive topics. How to recognize hidden issues that really underlie many of the arguments that people have. What's important is that these skills, we know from research, these are all, by the way, very research-based communication, conflict management skills, but we know that they're very essential for maintaining healthy relationships of all kinds over time. But I think these skills also really help in negotiating sexual life, in asserting and negotiating with a partner on boundaries, how to pace a relationship by using protection, condoms, contraception. It can help them define the relationship. You know, how do you have the talk and do it with confidence? How to put forth one's relationship expectations. And of course, for co-parenting, whether parents are together or not. Now we're ready to move on to sexual decision making, because with the relationship knowledge and skills, the groundwork is kind of laid to make decisions and to do sexual planning. But before exploring the sexual health material, I think we need to step back just a little bit, because I think youth, we really have to encourage youth to define that context for sex for them. It's not for me to tell them, for you to tell them, but to encourage them to define a context for sex that they find meaningful. I think oftentimes we start from the premise that young people, they know their boundaries, they know their values, they know when and with whom they move those boundaries, and what we need to do is come on in and hone their skills at refusal or negotiation, or, you know, to put on a condom, to learn, you know, about contraception, how to protect themselves. You know, all that's very critical. But I think, you know, in terms of knowing their sexual values and knowing, you know, how they want to pace things and what different levels of sexual intimacy mean and all of that, I think that's a lot more hazy. My experience with youth says it's not so clear. And I really, again, I always go back to this goal of empowerment. I think it's about helping youth define that context for sex that's meaningful to them. And so, how do you do it? Well, my best shot is this. We start with some provocative questions and discussions about, well, what makes for good sex? We use a music video by Life Jennings as a way to kind of get discussion going on that. But then we can deepen their understanding of intimacy. It's not just physical. I mean, there are several dimensions to intimacy. And they can use that framework, and we do in an activity to actually examine a relationship, a young relationship, and then they use this same schematic to examine their own relationship, a past relationship, or that of someone else's. I think it's also important that we present some of the basics on sexual arousal, the whole sort of sexual arousal process. There are similarities, there are differences between males and females. How does that affect things? And how does it affect whether you're on the same page or not? Whatever sexual orientation you are. And then in thinking about sexual meaning, I think it's very important to use the voices of youth. I've been collecting poetry, songs, raps, stories, narratives, music videos, film to help youth reflect. And we weave these into activities. One thing that maybe some of you have heard of Scenarios USA. I think it's just a fabulous outfit. They do contests around the country where teens write scripts for short films, 15 minutes. And then they are produced by, pretty slick Hollywood filmmakers. But anyways, I think some of these mediums encourage more thoughtful decisions about sex. And so with that, we're on to more explicit decision making. And so, for instance, where do you draw your line on the scale of physical intimacy? Or where would you draw your line if you could do things over? Or what about next time? How does it relate to your values, your desires? What do you want a particular level of physical intimacy to mean, sexual intimacy to mean? How do you want to pace it, the timing of sexual involvement? Not only the first time, like when's the first time, but when in any relationship, how deeply, how far, how fast you want to get involved. And when and under what conditions would you move your line? What are the risks to where your line is? What are the benefits to where your line is? And when you move it, how can you make sure it's a decision and not a slide? Again, it's about defining that context and defining a pace that's protective and meaningful. And with that, I think that young people are ready to plan for their choices. Young people, absolutely need medically accurate, solid information on reproduction, on anatomy, on contraception, including, I think, special emphasis on long-acting contraceptives, on STIs, on condoms. In Love Notes, we use some really excellent visual resources. We have a DVD on anatomy and reproduction. We also have another DVD on birth control methods, and we have a kind of some activity, it's sort of an interactive quiz. And after reviewing these and discussing these, we browse the national campaign website, so young people, know where to get more information. Youth are also taught the basics on STIs, transmission, symptoms, treatment. But in looking in addressing STIs, I think it's really, really important to touch the emotions. I mean, I think sometimes eyes roll over, oh, I've had this, a million times or whatever. But when you start to touch the emotions, I think you can hook people more. And so we use another Scenarios USA film called Reflections. It's about 3 girls and their relationships, and it's about HIV. And there's also a song, You Never Know by Immortal Technique, that deals with HIV. So we use these kinds of, film and song mediums to really engage, and we plan activities around that. And then youth are ready to develop a plan. the more intentional, the more young people make a plan, have steps, the more likely behavior may follow. It may not, but it makes it more likely if they're very specific about planning. And so either way, in the workbook, there's a very concrete planning section, a detailed, very detailed plan, setting out their intentions and their steps. So for instance, if a young person plans to delay sex, or they plan to pace and time physical intimacy much more slowly in a relationship, they have to have a plan. Rules on touch, how much time alone or being physically affectionate, when, how you'll together bring it up, how you'll discuss it, how you'll agree. If you're sexually active, what specific type of contraception? Where do you obtain it? How much does it cost? What's the schedule of use? And by the way, for heterosexuals, we have both partners fill this out. It's very important, agreement on condoms for STIs. This is important for all young people to do that kind of intentional planning out, to really think, okay, so what are my values, what are my boundaries, or, wherever they are, what is my plan to try to live by my intentions for, again, both gay and straight, LGBT and heterosexual kids. And then they need practice. They need practice and role plays and bringing it up, asserting their intentions and their values, negotiating the pacing. They need practice with refusal skills, with exit strategies from difficult situations. The next thing is, and I'm winding down now, is, and by the way, that sexual planning and sexual skills, refusal skills or negotiation skills, they can really draw on the healthy relationship skills that they've learned. And of course, they're asked to really do that because all the role plays are in the context of these relationships. Finally, reinforcing pregnancy prevention with a new message that I think might stick beyond the teen years. And, that's really important. I teach at a 2-year college, and I know that, the highest unplanned pregnancy rates, 18, 19, and actually, as I understand, what's really growing is young people with less than 1 year of college. So I want messages that are going to stick beyond the teen years. So I call it, again, through the eyes of a child, switching that focus from self about how an unplanned pregnancy will hurt you to how it affects the child. Several activities that are used in Love Notes to get at that. They work together, they produce an ad, an unborn child looking for a family. They come up with this amazing list of what helps parents to nurture and raise a child. And anyways, what's interesting is that it's great for a discussion about sort of sequence and planning and how being a little older, having your education under your belt, having some employment, being in a committed relationship, a healthy marriage would really help parents. And for young parents, the importance of that same sort of sequence, being the best parent you can, really focusing on your education, employment, and waiting on a second child until you have some of that settled and that you are married. They also, we bring in fathers and family formation. They do an amazing free write on what it means to be a good father. We use music. There's many songs on father loss and father longing, many, many. And there's a few on positive fathering. And we use music. Music really touches people. We use Eminem, the music video, When I'm Gone. Every young person knows about Eminem and his autobiographical songs about his daughter Haley and his relationship troubles, and we use that as a way to really talk about the difficulties of being an involved father when you have unstable and troubled relationships. We also do a child speak activity, which is one of my favorites. It's a collection of 10 pieces of advice from former teen parents working with developmental experts on what helps babies have brighter futures. And then what they do is they work in pairs and They take one item and turn it around, pretend you're a child and your parents are not following the advice, and describe your life. It's really quite powerful. I've had so many young people say to me, oh my gosh, this is pregnancy prevention. Anyways, this is just a start. I think we need to develop more and more engaging ways for youth to really, really get it. Why does it matter to be a planner? Why does it matter to plan and not slide or just drift? Why that really, really matters. And, you know, I think integrating relationship education with pregnancy prevention really offers us an opportunity to help young people be planners with their love lives, and to also be planners with their educational and employment goals. And this now brings me towards the end and a question that maybe some of you who are familiar with the 2012 edition of Love Notes in terms of, well, what are the differences with this new version? And so the first thing I'd like to say are what some of the new elements are quickly, and that is we have added scenarios, activities, supplements, examples, and some supplements that represent workplace situations to more explicitly build the soft skills that employers say are lacking. So, for example, regarding personality style that gets in the way, expectations applied to workplace situations, and lots on the communication skills to practice in workplace situations. We also have included content to help young people understand some of the basics of child support, in particular emphasizing to the non-custodial parent why it's important to pay child support, no matter how you feel about your ex. It's really about what your efforts mean to your child, to show your child you care. And also to the custodial parent, the harm in bad-mouthing the other parent of the child over child support. And we even cover why a new romantic partner should be as supportive as possible of the non-custodial parent making those payments. Also, just in terms of the new version, the 2.1 version, essentially you have all the same lessons, concepts, and skills. There are some updates on statistics. There are some edits to make the text more concise, to add even more inclusive language. The workbook is a little clearer, easier to use, and again, more inclusive images. The PowerPoints in this version, the video clips are embedded right into the PowerPoints, and there's an entirely new set of video clips for communication lessons. There's some really cool, short, engaging, what's called lecture doodles on anger, the brain falling in love, sliding into living together, and also all of the music videos and some TED Talks and some YouTube clips, short ones, are again hyperlinked right in the PowerPoints. And so finally, let me just talk a little bit about the Tier 2 study, because Love Notes has just recently finished that study. It was conducted in Louisville, Kentucky, primarily with low-income youth. 88% of the population in the study was African-American teens. There were 3 randomly assigned groups. One set of groups got Love Notes, one set of groups got Reducing the Risk, which is a more traditional health-based pregnancy prevention program. Another group, the control group, got a community engagement program. And I think the sort of highlight result is that 12 months later, the teens that received Love Notes, 3.5% got pregnant, 6% of the teens receiving Reducing the Risk got pregnant, and 6.5% of the control group got pregnant. And I guess what it really means is that the teens that received Love Notes had a 45% lower pregnancy rate than those in the control group, and 40% lower than those in the traditional health-based pregnancy prevention program. So again, I think adding this relationship element can really augment our pregnancy prevention efforts. However, you know, I'm enthused, and I think this is promising. But again, I guess I want to temper it a little bit. because those results are 12 months, right? And the real challenge is, how do we sustain that effect? How do we improve that effect? Love Notes in the study was delivered over 2 Saturdays. There was some time condensation of many things, and there were no follow-up boosters. Now, that 2-day model, that 2-day compressed model, was really excellent for a study that needs retention and dosage, to really see what you're doing here. But the evaluator said that she feels the results might be stronger if the lessons were spread out over more than 2 Saturdays and if there were booster sessions allowed. It's kind of like the flu shot, you need it every year. That might allow more time to kind of work the concepts and activities, allow more applications with the workbook, more discussions with the activities, and more time with those trusted adult connection, to digest and integrate the material. But at this point, I need to stop and see if there is time for any questions. Okay?
Yeah, so no, we have about 10 minutes for questions. And so if anyone does have any questions, go ahead and just pop those into the box on the right. You can just type it in, and then I'll be able to ask Marline. And then maybe, Marline, while we're waiting for that, go ahead and go over your contact information.
Oh, here. If anybody wants to contact me, I teach at a 2-year college. I do a lot of ad hoc teaching at community groups with teens and in the community and elsewhere, but this is a good contact for me. And of course, through Dibble, you can contact me, and that's my phone number. So anyways, I'm always happy to talk to anybody who, has questions or
So actually,
whatever.
we do have some questions that are coming in. So
Okay.
Matthew wants to know, has there been any work done with love notes and commercially sexually exploited children and or youth that have a history of inappropriate sexual contact, which may or not have left them with juvenile justice involvement?
Well, yes, and Aaron, you can really help me answer this. Yes, actually, it's been used in it's been used with youth that have been who are in actually what do you call it? Juvenile corrections, detention, and as we know, quite a few. By the way, you may not know this, but I'm actually a criminologist. I was a criminologist before I became a relationship and sexuality educator. And I still am a criminologist, and my whole focus is high-risk kids and families. Yeah, there are a number of people that are using it with youth in various kinds, group homes, institutions, and yes, absolutely, some of those children have been exploited commercially, trafficking. So yes, and Aaron, maybe you can respond to that more. But
yeah,
I mean, I'd have to actually look up. I mean, I'm sure that if you got in touch with us, and particularly Aaron and the Dibble, they can even put you in touch with people that have. But yes, and in my own work, oh my gosh, I deal. The 2-year college system is the great democratic open door institution. I deal with so many students, the walking wounded, who have literally, developed, they're really, they've, what can I say? I'm so proud of them. I mean, they've gotten themselves together, but yes, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's been used in an incredibly wide range of different audiences, everything from the foster youth programs to juvenile justice to at risk. Another person just asked homeless.
Yeah.
Yep, the homeless youth. And in terms of, another person asked, what age group is this program appropriate for? And while technically we say ages 15 to 24, I actually know that in Detroit it's been used in the inner city schools with some of their freshmen, so it's been used successfully with some of the younger kids as well. Somebody else is wondering about the more inclusive images, and basically that just means that we've included some additional images like you've seen in Marlene's slides that include more of the LGBT kids so that they understand that this can also help them. Another question Penny had about the sample size of the study, and I can go ahead and answer that as well. And so Penny, what they did, it was a randomly controlled study, and they had 511, and I'm remembering off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this, but it's pretty close. So I believe it was 511 of the RTR, the reducing the risk kids participated in that group, and then 507 the love notes, and then for the control group, the ones that did the community thing, it was about 411. And so that's why I had Marlene put up the percentages rather than the raw numbers, just so that you could get more of an apples to apples. And then another, I just answered that one. So Javier asked Marlene, and you can answer this one better. So what would you suggest would be the total length of time if somebody wanted to teach all 13 lessons?
Okay, well, as I said, in the study, they did it over 2 full days, 2 full Saturdays, okay? But they had to condense things, and they had to assume for many of the workbook things that they would do them at home and all that. So yeah, there are 13 lessons, but if truth be told, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those are probably really double lessons. I sometimes say, what you find with this curriculum is students just, the activities get them going, and the scenarios and the music and the films and all that, they want to talk, and it really gets them going. If the big problem people have is, oh, how do you kind of, okay, cut this now and let's move on. So anyways, I would say 15 to 20 hours, depending. I have some techniques that I used to get them to watch the Antoine Fisher film, so I don't have to show that in the session, because that's about an hour and a half movie, but oh, it's really powerful. But again, I mean, you can decide. People have taken, maybe taken a lesson out, but I think, I guess it would be useful to at least go with the amount of time that they used in Kentucky. But in all honesty, I don't know. I'm gonna give you a ballpark, 15 to 20 hours. I mean, if you really want to kind of do it all.
And then another quick question.
Again.
Another quick question.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, and by the way, I was just going to say one thing. For instance, for instance, in the sexual planning lesson, some leaders have already done the bioreproduction anatomy. They've done the condoms. They've done the contraception, and so in fact, you may not have to do all of that, but you could reinforce it with some of the films and songs and activities around birth control, negotiation, role plays, and all that. So there are, some people have been able to shorten it that way depending on what they've done. Okay.
And then somebody else has the question in terms of, well, and I'll answer this one. How do we get this program and how much is it? And so you can actually order the program if you go to dibbleinstitute.org and then click on the Love Notes program, and I believe it's $395. And then another question for you, Marlene, and that is, does race or class play a role in the effectiveness of Love Notes?
Okay, good question. First of all, I wrote Love Notes with more sort of lower socioeconomic, diverse teens and young adults in mind. In the Kentucky study, I think 82% of the sample was low income, 88% was African American. But having said that, I will tell you that I have used this with all sorts of young people. While, if you think about like music and film and all of that, just like, we used to think long ago, we used to think, oh, hip hop music, only kids in the inner city listen to that, but everybody listens to it. So while it's really kind of geared at more at risk, I think most of it is just, I've even used it in my college classes, and my students love it. Now I have a whole mixture. I have a whole mixture. In one of my classes, I could have a college graduate from Northwestern sitting right next to a guy on electronic bracelet, sitting right next to an 18-year-old woman who had her first child at 15. I have such a diversity, but I find that it works really well with all kinds of people. And I guess another statement I would make is, I think about my own two daughters. My own two daughters have done the workbook, and they love it. And I think in some ways, what we want for our children, we should want for all children. But yes, really, the scenarios are, some of them can be very, very edgy. And there's so many scenarios in the activity cards that are included in the curriculum that you literally can, you can choose which ones you want to use, and you can ask your participants to write new ones for extra credit and all that. But so I don't know if I hope I'm answering your question. Please follow it up if you'd like to. Okay.
Yep. And we actually have a whole bunch of questions that we've kind of run out of time, and we have a whole bunch of questions. And so what we'll do is we'll individually send out emails to follow up with you. But I did want to address one of them, and that was somebody asked about training. And we actually have a number of trainings all across the country coming up over the next few months, especially with the super exciting announcement that we're going to be able to make next month. But we do have a number of trainings across the country, and so you can go ahead and contact us. Let me put up the contact information specifically for Kathy. She's the person in charge of training, but also wanted to point out for those of you who may have come in late, we'll have an archive of the webinar up on our website in a couple of days. And then you can see Kathy at dibbleinstitute.org. She's the one who's actually in charge of our trainings. And so you can contact her to ask about some of the upcoming trainings. And then I also wanted to let everyone know about our upcoming webinar, which is in May 11th, and it's putting youth relationship education on the child welfare agenda, findings from research and evaluation. And so Mindy Scott and April Wilson will be joining us. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for taking some time this afternoon, especially to thank Marline for taking some time out of her incredibly busy schedule. And hopefully
Well, that's okay. And not too busy to take any calls or emails.
Okay.
And also, we will definitely, Aaron and I will work together to answer these, any questions that didn't get answered.
Yep. So thank you, and we wish everyone...
also too, we wrote the curriculum to be very user-friendly. So it didn't actually require training, although almost everybody has found it's always kind of useful. I'm a pretty veteran teacher myself, and I know I really appreciate actually sort of seeing somebody else do it and explain it and all that. But it's a pretty user-friendly curriculum.
It is, and it does make it so much easier for people to implement it, because sometimes you might get overwhelmed when you first see it, but by attending one of the trainings, you'll definitely walk away. Everyone gives us the feedback that they walk away going, you know what, I can do this. And so once again, wanted to thank everyone for all of your efforts in strengthening relationships. And if you do have any questions, go ahead and contact us. And so thanks, and have a great day.